Hi, everyone. I'm Gregg Tully. I'm a consultant for animal protection organizations around the world. I help them identify and overcome challenges and grow and increase their impact. I help with high-level topics like making strategic plans and succession plans and fundraising strategies, as well as more operational areas like building effective management teams, evaluating programs, building stronger boards of directors, and designing sanctuaries and other animal care facilities. But today I'm going to talk with you about the essential role of Ukrainian communities in dog and cat population management. So I'll talk about the situation facing animals in Ukraine, how we're making an impact, three of the programs we're running: donating food, population management, and vet treatment, and what the future holds for Ukrainian animals. So it's been more than 3 years since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the crisis there continues to present a unique challenge for dog and cat population management. Even before the Russian military invaded in 2022, there were substantial populations of roaming dogs and cats in the cities as well as in towns and villages. But there were very few dog and cat population management programs. Furthermore, there wasn't a culture of sterilizing pets. Pet owners and government officials generally didn't appreciate the importance of sterilization. A lot of pet owners actually resisted sterilization even when it was offered for free. Only a small number of dog population surveys had been conducted in Ukraine. And of those, a lot of them were done years ago, or the results were hard to interpret. So Ukraine really wasn't on the radar of the international animal protection community. There are some important exceptions, but overall, few international organizations had people on the ground there or had relationships with partners in Ukraine. There are a few big Ukrainian organizations that protect animals that have staff and have international relationships, but the vast majority of them are local animal shelters and rescue groups that are mostly or entirely run by volunteers. They don't have dedicated communications people. A lot of them only communicate in Ukrainian or Russian, and they really aren't set up to accept support from other countries. So, as a result of the war, 14 million Ukrainian people have fled their homes, many of them leaving countless family pets on the streets. Since most of these animals weren't sterilized, this has created potential for a population explosion on a scale that Ukraine has never seen. And it's really shocking. Just walking around, we see animals that are obviously not, street dogs with survival skills. These are people's Chihuahuas and Pomeranians that are struggling to find food, and in winter, they're desperate to stay out of the snow and rain. From the perspective of disaster response, this war is unusual because many organizations have had policies of not allowing their staff to go to Ukraine, especially the large international organizations that typically deploy teams of disaster specialists and animal handlers and veterinarians. They've donated very generously, but most of them haven't sent people on the ground with expertise, and they still don't. So this has resulted in a shortage of expertise in Ukraine about topics like disaster response and population management and coordinating teams of volunteers. So I'm helping animals in Ukraine as part of Wildlife and Welfare, which is a UK-based NGO led by James Florence. Wildlife and Welfare provides support to animals where there's urgent need, including emergency response, such as the bushfires in Australia, the earthquake in Turkey, and now in Ukraine. So we face the question of how can we make a meaningful impact in Ukraine given the lack of international expertise in the country? I mean, we can go to Ukraine sometimes, but we can't spend enough time there to manage projects from start to finish, and we don't speak Russian or Ukrainian. So without trained animal handlers and dedicated vehicles and animal handling equipment or staff on the ground, it seemed impossible. But the Ukrainian community members have made this work a success. What we're doing absolutely would not be possible without them. A lot of this work of rescuing animals in need, keeping abandoned pets alive and healthy through food donations and veterinary treatment, and conducting sterilization projects is being done by a broad network of amazing Ukrainian people rather than international professionals that came from abroad. So, first program I'll talk about is food donations. Now, because far more animals are on the streets of Ukraine than ever before, and because many of these animals have no experience surviving, and fewer people are feeding local community dogs and cats, widespread starvation is a very real risk in Ukraine. So we've been distributing food aid to abandoned pets. We worked with Ukrainian partners to form a network of dozens of community members. So we buy dog and cat food from local companies, and we instruct some volunteers and animal shelter managers to collect this food and give it to other volunteers, who then pass it on to even more volunteers. And some of the food goes to animals in shelters, but most of it is going to roaming dogs and cats on the streets. Last year, we donated 82 tons of food, and in previous years, when there was more support for Ukraine, we gave far more. In total, we regularly feed more than 9,000 roaming animals, protecting them from starvation. And then the members of the community send us photos and videos as evidence of what they're doing. Now, we're complementing the short-term impact of food support with dog and cat population management, which, of course, makes a longer-term and more sustained impact. Now, we didn't want to support surgeries performed by vets we didn't know anything about. So I asked our Ukrainian partners who bring roaming animals for sterilizations and treatment to recommend clinics that they've worked with directly that have good reputations. So we depended on their experience, and I kind of combined their answers and made a short list of clinics that we then traveled to Ukraine and visited. We looked at their facilities, we met with the owners and the vets and talked about their procedures and observed them doing surgery. Based on that, we chose 4 clinics that we're partnering with that have really high standards. One is in Mykolaiv, which is near the front line of the war. 2 are in Odessa, which is the biggest city in southern Ukraine, which has repeatedly been hit by brutal Russian military strikes. And 1 is in Ismail. So Ismail is a town that's not really close to the front line, but even before the war, it had a reputation for people abandoning unwanted litters of puppies and kittens there, because it's known for local people who feed and take care of these strays. And now, because of the war, far more people are dumping animals there, and the number of unwanted pets in Ismail has become a huge burden on the local volunteers, especially before we started sterilizing there. So I've coordinated with dog population management programs in various countries, but I've never done it from a different country. But thanks to these Ukrainian community members, it's gone remarkably smoothly. So we're using 2 different approaches for sterilizations. One is surgeries that take place at the vet clinics. We tell these partner clinics that we'll pay for sterilizations up to a certain amount of money. We then raise awareness among these communities of volunteers and animal rescuers. They make appointments with the clinics, and they bring in roaming dogs and cats. And most of the volunteers who are bringing the animals are people in the network that we formed for food distribution. So, when they're feeding animals on the streets, they usually know which ones have already been sterilized, and they notice when a new animal comes to the area that needs to be sterilized. And because they feed these animals regularly, they've gained their trust, and they're usually able to just pick them up and put the animals in pet carriers or in boxes or backpacks or whatever they have, and bring them to the clinics for surgery. Also, these community members know which dogs are hard to catch, and for these cases, we contact skilled animal handlers who have the experience darting shy dogs, although this does take more time and it costs more money. In addition to the surgeries, we make sure that all these animals are vaccinated for rabies and are microchipped. So to ensure accountability for every animal whose surgery we pay for, we require the clinics to send us a photo of the volunteer who brought the animal in front of the clinic or in the clinic reception, and a photo of that animal on the surgery table with the microchip number. We also require the clinics to fill in a Google sheet that is a line for every animal with details, including the volunteer's contact information. And we compare the number of photos to the numbers in the Google sheet and the numbers in the invoices the clinics send us, and we make sure that everything matches. After the surgery, when the vets say animals can be released, the community members then take care of these animals in their homes, return them to their own neighborhoods when appropriate, and then whenever they're feeding the animals, they can also monitor them for complications. We also support the sterilizations of animals at shelters. The shelter volunteers bring the animals to clinics in a very similar method. The second way we run sterilization projects is targeted short-term projects in villages and neighborhoods that have a lot of unsterilized animals. These require more planning because usually a vet team needs to travel to the area and spend some days there. Someone needs to find a room that the vets can use for surgery that has electricity and running water. And we need to ensure that volunteers can bring enough unsterilized animals to keep the vets productive all day. We partner with Worldwide Vets, led by Gemma Campling, which has been an amazing collaborator. They've been running sterilization programs in Ukraine for years. And often, in some cases, they'll bring experienced vets and equipment and supplies. We identify the priority locations and we coordinate the volunteers, and then we share the costs. So these projects are more effective than just working at the clinics because we can sterilize almost every dog or cat in one area that people can catch, leaving very few animals in the area still able to breed. But it can be a challenge to coordinate all the moving parts of these projects, especially working from a different country. And we don't have the capacity to organize these continuously. So we're using a combination of the two approaches for sterilization programs. And it's absolutely amazing that because of these community members, we're sterilizing thousands of dogs and cats without the expenses of staff or vehicles. So not only does this keep the costs down, these programs would not be possible without the Ukrainian community. A third project that we're running is veterinary treatment. So when our partners are feeding roaming dogs and cats, they sometimes find animals that need veterinary care. It's unavoidable. Now, we don't aim to provide treatment for every sick and injured animal in Ukraine. That would be impossible. But I've told some of our close collaborators that when they find an animal that's injured or ill, and if a reasonable amount of treatment can pretty reliably produce a positive outcome for the animal, wildlife and welfare may cover the costs on a case-by-case basis. Now, we're careful because we don't want to spend our limited resources treating animals that have chronic illnesses or animals that will probably die no matter what we do. But our partners in Ukraine identify these animals. They send us updates and photos and videos, bring the animals to clinics, and then bring them back to their home areas when they're healthy. And they're excellent at this. They have so much experience from doing this work almost every day for years. We provide the support and we ensure that as much as possible, the animals have positive outcomes within a reasonable amount of time, and the community members do the rest. So last year, we gave life-saving treatment to more than 100 animals, and we're continuing to do this all the time. So we've been to some small villages in Ukraine that used to be home to thousands of people, but almost everyone left because of the dangers of war. Now there are just a few people left. Often it's older people who aren't strong enough to leave their homes and find somewhere else to live, and people who stayed behind in order to feed the roaming dogs and cats because they knew no one else would do it. Without them, truly these animals would starve. And we're providing them with dog and cat food, which is essential because most of them haven't earned any money since the war began. And if enough animals in a village need to be sterilized, we might be able to organize a veterinary team to go out and sterilize them. It's a great partnership. Neither we nor the people in the villages could help these dogs and cats without the other. So what's in it for these community members? Why are these people helping all these dogs and cats? Well, the Ukrainian economy is a shambles. A lot of businesses are closed because their owners fled their homes. Other businesses closed because too many of their staff were drafted into the war or left the country. This has left countless people unemployed, often just staying at home, feeling like they don't have any direction or any hope. And for a lot of these people, taking care of dogs and cats gives them a way to feel like they're doing something positive, something they can really feel good about. A lot of them have lost family members, lost their jobs. They can't afford any extra expenses, but this is a way for them to really make a positive impact. They've told us this again and again. They don't have enough money to take care of hundreds of dogs and cats on their own, but the support that we're giving them makes it possible. So what does the future hold for dogs and cats in Ukraine? Well, we're only able to do this work thanks to grants and donations from organizations and people around the world. We're continuing to work with worldwide vets and Ukrainian veterinary teams, but the limiting factor on this work is the availability of funds. When we've stopped sterilization programs because we didn't have enough money to continue them, and then we get a new donation or a new grant and we start again, the community members are so eager to bring animals for sterilizations. I can't tell you how grateful they are. They send us WhatsApp messages all the time with countless emojis in them. And now in Ukraine, we're seeing an increased interest in sterilization programs in places, partly due to these sterilization programs that we and other organizations are running. This has started with the people who are dedicated to helping animals, but it's spread to others, including some government officials. We're now seeing more municipalities are funding sterilization programs, which is fantastic because government involvement is a pillar of dog population management. Time will tell how Ukraine's roaming dog and cat populations will change, but the situation would be far, far worse without these dedicated community members. So Without the compassion and skills of these people, our programs in Ukraine wouldn't be possible. We provide the resources and we coordinate the efforts, but the Ukrainian community members really drive the programs forward. Wildlife and welfare doesn't have the vets and experienced animal handlers available to go to Ukraine for months at a time. Also, aside from the vet clinics and the experienced animal handlers, all of our partners in Ukraine are doing this as unpaid volunteers. And all of us in wildlife and welfare are working as volunteers as well. So this keeps the costs down and it makes sure that donations are helping as many animals as possible. Furthermore, our Ukrainian partners are contributing to a cultural shift in the country towards more compassion for roaming animals and towards sterilization becoming more accepted as part of responsible pet ownership. Well, thank you so much for your time. Again, my name's Greg. You can go to wildlifeandwelfare.org to learn more about our work in Ukraine. And please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you very much.